One of the major reasons that ufology hasn't been properly recognized by the scientific and journalistic community have been the staunch efforts of the astronomical community coupled with the SETI community to say there's life out there, but they ain't coming here. And therefore this UFO stuff is nonsense. They've been saying that for a long time. They won't look at the UFO evidence, but they have their own agenda to point out to us. They don't often tell you the underlying assumptions. This should not be surprising. In the newest book that John mentioned, we have a whole chapter on space, aviation. There are 14 chapters. Kathleen and I each did 7. And the point is that smart people have been saying basically stupid things for a long time. And astronomers have taken the lead. And, you know, I'll let a psychologist or a psychiatrist figure out why. The resistance to the new, the different. But before I get into that, let me give my usual two-minute introduction to where I stand so there'll be no question about the position that I hold. After 52 years of study and investigation, I'm convinced that the evidence is overwhelming that Earth is being visited by intelligently controlled extraterrestrial spacecraft. In other words, some UFOs are alien spacecraft. Most are not. I don't care about them. Most isotopes aren't fissionable. So what? You want to build a reactor, use the one that is. Secondly, we're dealing with a cosmic Watergate, meaning some few people within governments around the world have known since at least July 1947, when bodies and vehicles were recovered in New Mexico, that indeed some UFOs are alien spacecraft. They didn't say the government knows, some few people within government. The third conclusion is, despite the rantings of the noisy negativists, that there are no good arguments against the first two. Not that people haven't tried, but none of them stand up when compared to the evidence. And finally, fourth, we're dealing with the biggest story of the millennium. I'm not a mollycoddler. I don't walk gently into that big night. Now, you put all that together, we're talking about the biggest story. I say millennium because if I said 2, then I'd get into religious arguments, and I don't want to get into those. Not here now. Okay. Now, one would think, therefore, that people interested in outer space would be in the forefront of those looking at the UFO evidence. And at one time, people like Dr. J. Allen Hynek, an astronomer after all, Air Force consultant on Project Blue Book for over 20 years, author of an excellent book, The UFO Experience. You'd think that astronomers today would naturally refer you to Allen's book. No such luck. Instead, we get told that there is no evidence that Earth is being visited. Now, do they tell you this and say, look, I've looked at all these scientific studies, there's nothing to them? No, they'll tell you there are no scientific studies. Very strange. In my usual lectures, I talk about 5 large-scale scientific studies. When Dr. Seth Shostak attended my lecture on the Queen Elizabeth II, that was a sort of weird trip. We each gave 3 lectures. What else are you going to do in the North Atlantic but listen to a lecture on space or UFOs? After each major study, I asked how many people here have read this. He didn't raise his hand any times. And yet the byword is there is no evidence for UFOs. Now, let's look at the assumptions of the astronomical community. 1, there is alien life in outer space. I'm not going to argue with that. 2, ain't nobody coming here. If they were, they'd have sent us a signal. We haven't detected any signals from anybody out there, but just wait, it'll happen. That's assuming that aliens out there are using technology compatible with our 2010 radio technology. Well, I don't know about you people, but I don't use the slide rule anymore. I said that to a couple of classes up in Michigan, and I was saying how much technology has changed in the last 50 or so years, and I said, you know, when I started working in industry, I was using a slide rule, and I looked around, no reaction at all. I said, do any of you know what a slide rule is? Not one. Not one. And that's less than 50 years. The point is that times change, technology changes. And if we don't recognize that, we're losing out here. So I want to go over, we have a strange situation. This year, the press has been kinder to the idea of aliens than in many, many years. Oh, not UFOs, it's not the same thing. But there have been respectable scientists talking about life in outer space. When Stephen Hawking says something, people listen, even though what he said wasn't too bright, frankly. And I'll go into specifics in a minute. And I know some people don't like my saying that SETI really stands for silly effort to investigate. SETI, in case you didn't notice that. Well, let's look at the assumptions. Life out there, nobody coming here, no evidence for UFOs, interstellar travel is out of the question. They will send us signals. And if they haven't sent us a signal, they certainly haven't come here. Now, if you can figure that one out, you're a better man than I am, Gunga Din. I'll throw in the remark now, it should come when I'm talking about Stephen Hawking, but did any of you ever hear about Columbus sending a smoke signal to the natives in the New World before he took off? I don't think so.